The Magic Circle is about one of those video games that never actually gets finished. Due to feature creep, conflict among the development staff, and a generally huge scope that far exceeds anything that could be reasonably delivered upon, the game in the Magic Circle, itself also called the Magic Circle, is in a half-finished state of buggy environments, missing combat systems, and partially implemented levels. Players find themselves inhabiting this shell of a game world, fully aware of its artificiality and incomplete nature. They quickly meet an entity that wants them to use the content and systems that are there in order to get access to the development machine and interfere with the demo of the game at a major expo in order to get the game out of the developer's hands, so that someone else will actually be able to finish it.
You're thinking, that's it? Did I miss the punchline? And you're right, boss. This world is a joke. And I need you to finish it.
Let's get this out of the way. Yes, the Magic Circle is, in turn, a game about games. And yes, I'm as bored with the general navel-gazing of developers as you are. But the good news, the Magic Circle, as developed by Question Games, I get it, brings a fair bit of nuance and humanity to topics that could have easily just been in-jokes, lazy references, and snark. But that's not to suggest the game isn't very inside baseball. The game was developed by BioShock and Dishonored alumni, and it feels like they've got battle stories to tell. Among the collectibles in the game are notes that feel like small, real-world anecdotes. A forest that's confusing to navigate gets a series of tunnels to help, but the tunnels themselves turn into something of a maze. Level designers leave passive-aggressive notes about being blamed for the decisions of the art department when aesthetic decisions screw with functionality. There are comments about trying to design for emergent behavior but running into memory restrictions when systems are left to operate on their own devices, and lessons about how virtual ecologies need population control systems to avoid feedback loops. These feel a lot like BioShock or Dishonored-style development conversations are being laid bare here, even if they're fictionalized. The conflict between narrative and gameplay pops up early on, with the developers debating about whether giving players the freedom to kill story characters is player expression that needs to be respected, or a subversive act that ruins the structure of the story such that one might as well not even tell it.
They demand a world full of deep, compelling characters, yet at any time, they reserve the right to turn said people into piles of gently glowing ash. Well, what possible story could survive these conditions?
It's very much a game for people interested in game dev, both the theory and the gritty practice, and it doesn't do much to explain what any of this stuff means to those unfamiliar with that world. Even the title, The Magic Circle, refers to a game design term. Coined by Johann Huizinga in his 1938 book Homo Ludens, it was an attempt to describe the idea that play exists in self-contained boundaries, sometimes physically like a football field or the stage of a play, but also conceptually. Play exists in a sort of consequence-free reality that is separate from this one. In this game, though, the Magic Circle is actually a fairly overloaded metaphor. It is the prison that contains the entity that gave you your powers, and it refers to the title of the fictional game within a game. But it also references the cycles that the game's developers find themselves trapped in over and over, unable to finish the game and having the same arguments about player agency and grand narrative vision. However, the player character doesn't respect the sanctity of the game being designed. The core mechanic is to rewrite and rewire systems to do what you want rather than playing the game as intended. The fact that the player character either rejects or exists outside of the Magic Circle, the Huizinga concept, implies that they can also break the development cycles that keep the game from being finished. But the Magic Circle also represents the ring that the game's lead developer, Ishmael Gilder, lost in his divorce. He mentions the Magic Circle as a wedding ring explicitly in the game's opening.
My old man used to take off his wedding ring and sort of flick it into a spin. I remember being scared to blink, like, what if he loses it? Would he lose Mom? Would he lose me? So, that's our cold open. Just a ring, twirling over black. Will it stand or fall?
Over the course of the game, it becomes apparent that Ish is working through his personal issues, from his failed marriage to his infertility, through the development of the game. His wife becomes Ava Nadir, an entity who opposes the sanctity of the Magic Circle. And in a Scotch-fueled developer commentary from an earlier build of the game, Ish says that he sees an abstract, nondescript player as something like a child to guide through the world he's created for them.
I know how it sounds, but I think I started to regard you as my children. I can only hope that somewhere out there, one of you felt the same.
The Magic Circle is at its strongest when it's dealing with this sort of human drama, when it's de-glamorizing game development by making its creators people first and media personalities or creators of awesome things second. The casting is spot on, and the conflicts and struggles of its characters feel genuine, if a little one-dimensional. James Urbaniak refined his ability to project an egotistical, self-loathing narcissist on the Venture Brothers, and manages to bring a lot of that into Ish.
I find the right people, I lock them in a room. The only word for what emerges is a miracle. Or we kill each other. Either way, problem solved.
Ashley Birch injects a lot of her over-the-top energy into Coda, a diehard fan of previous games in the Magic Circle series who is maybe a little too excited to be on the dev team.
That is the passion of a fan. Maybe the fan. In my family, it's a toss-up who has the more anticipated sequel. You or Jesus.
Coda, it's just a game.
Not to me.
Correct answer.
Karen Dyer's Maze has a wry cynicism about the project that nicely conflicts with Ish's grandiose visions and Coda's fangirling, putting her at odds with the Dreamers and setting up a bit of a mechanics versus narrative thing.
I feel compelled to reward you somehow, but minus any systems, all that's left is story.
And Stephen Russell, of Thief fame, plays the self-aware code segment from the previous version of the game, dealing with the ennui of being trapped in a series of unfinished prototypes, while the gods who built his world bicker over seemingly trivial matters. He's at once angry and bitter, yet hopeful that you can succeed where he failed.
Well, the gods claim that they hold up the sky. But I say, knock it down. Don't you want to see what's behind it?
It's not that these are particularly nuanced characters, and it's not that these performances are profoundly emotional or anything. Pretty much everyone here has been cast to type. But nonetheless, when the characters appear, in audio logs or on the screen, the game lights up, the plot moves forward, and it has this wonderful tone that's at once humorous and tongue-in-cheek, but also sort of mournful for how broken every one of them really is. Unfortunately, most of that character stuff is locked away in optional collectibles that you need to search out. It's easy to end up finishing the game with only half of the backstory understood, and while you can go back to the overworld after it's all over and pick up whatever you've missed, it ruins the pacing of the story, coming in fits and spurts as rewards rather than progressing as you play and potentially putting the exposition of the game after its conclusion. Still, that's not an accident. The story pacing is backgrounded in favor of focusing on a small open world for thematic reasons. Players are put into an overworld that draws influence from Zelda, or, given the interest in sequence breaking, perhaps Metroid, in the sense that each major area has one or two new abilities waiting for you to unlock and use elsewhere. The ultimate goal being to hack into Ish's IDE in order to interfere with the development of the game itself. And while hoarding all of the powers is useful towards that end, the game wants you to try to glitch it out, and to solve simple problems with wacky solutions. It wants to be sequence broken, or played subversively. Do you like going where you think you're not supposed to, or doing the opposite of what the developer tells you to do? Try climbing up the side of the mountain by jumping on the geometry rather than taking the path. The game hides some story unlocks up there for you if you do. Once you get access to flying creatures, don't you want to see what's above the skybox? Do you want to get across some lava? You could throw a bunch of rocks down as stepping stones, or you could hack the Jugadillos to be legless and fireproof and toss them in. Or you could give a Jugadillo flight, hack its AI so that it's an ally and will go wherever you point, and coast over the whole thing. Or you could give two monsters teleport abilities, throw one across the lava, and use monster teleporters to just solve the problem. Or, screw the lava. Fight your way to Ish's terminal without the powers on the other side of it, if you can. The game doesn't care. The game wants you to ignore designer intent, and the whole time Stephen Russell's old pro is egging you on.
Now, the gods would tell you exactly what to do next. Not me. I want you burning with righteous doubt. Call BS on everything. Even me.
The game doesn't care what you do to it. Except it does. And I think that's the problem with the Magic Circle thematically. The main game is built around championing a sort of deconstructivist, almost anarchistic approach to playing games. Forget what some idiot designer says is the right way to solve a problem. Forget the path that some pretentious level designer put forward for you. Find your own solutions. Forge your own paths. Be an independent thinker.
If creation is a language, you want to be the slang.
But then you reach the end of the game where you've hacked the demo and have been given control over finishing the game yourself. And here the game pulls a complete 180, putting you in the designer's shoes and asking you to build a version of the Magic Circle yourself. And the amount of, for lack of a better word, game development juice you get to build your vision is predicated on how much of the game's content, The real game's content you unlocked. How many of those hidden development notes did you find? How many types of creatures did you manage to hack? Did you fully exhaust the content provided for you?
You deserve a little more life and joy. All this was worth some extra life as well.
Suddenly the game is no longer looking for your clever solutions or for you to step outside of the box. It's looking for you to tick boxes, to fill bars, and to listen to the developer's intent. When subversive plays the point, it isn't all that subversive. Worse, the metric they grade your game on is painfully banal, which is a shame, because the rudimentary tools they provide you with are kinda neat. You chain prefab rooms together, then place enemies and loot, trigger musical cues, and write your own little story segments. It's not exactly Unity, it's not even really Little Big Planet, but it gives an accessible window into 3D world-building tools. Then when you're feeling happy with your creation, you can ask the game to give it a spin for you. And the sole quality metric is a boredom meter. Keep the content varied, the challenge difficult but not impossible, and you'll have a hit game on your hands. And it feels like just such a weirdly empty, narrow way for a game that has so much knowledge about game development and game design to approach measuring the quality of a game. It spends the bulk of its playtime asking you to tear down walls and see past the artificiality of game systems and designer intent, then asks you to build a forgettable, linear, combat and loot-driven content muncher out of pre-made parts. And maybe that's the point. Maybe it's a commentary on how we judge games and how that's a restriction on how games are made, but because it doesn't really give you the freedom to build anything else and fail, and because it doesn't really directly comment on that being bad, it doesn't come across that way. Still, there is something rewarding about watching an algorithm try your game. It doesn't capture the feeling of real creation, of making something and sharing it with a flesh and blood audience, but it approximates it by letting you watch characters play through it and provide feedback in real time.
You know, I'd have done it differently, but this is okay. This might be the sequel I wanted. Might. The magic circle. I'm actually playing it!
You see design decisions succeed or fail in ways you might not expect, or in just the way you intended them to. It hammers home the iterative nature of game development, the fact that original visions never escape unscathed.
Yeah, getting bored here. Hint, hint.
The idea is to get you to feel that spark of creation. The old pro, acting as what borders on a developer self-insertion character, says as much.
So I wanted you to play God for a day, but not out of some great kindness of spirit. It's 'cause there's a 1,000,000,000 chance that maybe now fun ain't enough. Maybe now you want a world all your own, enough to carve it by hand. And maybe in your story, I won't see the end coming.
I'm not sure the Magic Circle delivers on some of its more grand ambitions, to inspire people to make their own games, to pry apart the complex relationship between fans of a work and those who create it, to examine the artifice of games and why we respect it, and why we sometimes don't. Those are big, complex questions, and it mostly just dips its toe into them, and sometimes in confused ways. But where it succeeds is developing a sense of empathy for those who build our games, the sorts of issues they face both technically and creatively, the collaborative nature of game development, the iterative nature of game development, and above all the fact that those who produce the games we love are as flawed and as vulnerable as anyone else, and the job we ask of them is harder and more constrained than a lot of people realize. And the more you think about it, this isn't really a game about games at all. It's a game about humanizing game developers without excusing them for any of their flaws or failures. And to that end, I think the game succeeds wonderfully.